Hey guys, welcome back to Raise RC. Got another review video today. This is upgrade number 6 in the Traxxas Slash two-wheel drive racer build series. And if you watched my video on basically upgrade number 5, I did a review of the hot racing steel differential. Was not really happy with that product. Basically it leaked and didn't perform very well. So I was looking for an alternative. I was looking for something else to use. And if you saw my preview video, basically what I went with is the Traxxas Pro Ball differential. There's going to be a review of that product. So I've gotten a chance to run this for a while, and I wanted to talk about it and my thoughts. First of all, I wanted to talk real quick about the difference between a gear diff and a ball diff. So ball diffs obviously have ball bearings basically pressed together through two different sides of the out drives with a spring in between them to basically pull the out drives together. So basically the ball bearings spin inside the gear. If you see these little holes here, basically there's one ball bearing that sits in each individual hole, and basically it can rotate the two out drives that way. Gear discs basically are sealed fluid filled differentials with either spider gears or planetary gears inside, and basically the gears spin within the differential and resist movement via the viscosity of the fluid that's actually sitting there in the differential. So advantages of the gear diff are that basically it's much more durable, basically you handle a lot more power, it can't really slip. So really a good differential for bashing, for high-powered vehicles, for really high traction surfaces where you're afraid the diff might slip. The ball diffs can actually slip. So those are kind of the pros of the gear differential. The cons are that basically it's filled with fluid and it's kind of a pain to change the action of the diff. You basically have to drain the differential, open it up, put in different viscosity, and then test again. So a little less convenient to use. They can also leak, right? Obviously if the seals go bad, or you have a poor design like the hot racing gear differential, they can leak fluids and then basically lose their diff action, their limited slip diff action. So those are the cons of the gear diffs. So obviously from the ball diff perspective, advantages are that it's externally adjustable. You don't have to take apart the whole transmission and drain anything. They cannot leak, right? Obviously there's no fluid in there. They basically are mechanical only. Ball bearings basically providing the resistance, and sometimes they're lighter, sometimes they're heavier. It kind of depends on the gear diffs. I've seen gear diffs versus ball diffs. Some are heavier, some are lighter. But the cons are that basically they can slip, so you have to be much more careful. Probably a little more experienced tuning the diff, setting the diff, paying attention to the diff. The diff action is also a little different. It tends to be kind of a little more linear. I'd say kind of the two halves of the diff. They'll rotate based on basically the spring tension that you apply, and they tend to be more constant or more consistent diff action. Whereas the gear diffs, I find that there's tends to be a little bit of mesh, a little bit of play in between the two. So you kind of get a little bit of slop, and then suddenly it'll bite, it'll grab, the teeth will engage, and then you'll get like that full diff action, and it kind of tends to ramp up as the diffs spin at different speeds. So they do feel a little bit different. Not a huge difference, but if you're paying attention, if you're kind of familiar with these two types of diffs, you will notice a little bit of difference in the diff action. So ball diffs tend to be better two-wheel drive vehicles, lower traction, maybe more precision in the diff action. Gear diffs tend to be a little bit better, high-powered vehicles, maybe really high grip situations. Four-wheel drive vehicles, tend to all have gear diffs. So it's not that one is better than the other. It's just that they both kind of have their pros and cons, and it's best to kind of apply the right differential to the type of vehicle and kind of to the style and preference that you have. So that's kind of a quick overview of differentials and the difference between ball and gear diffs. And so I want to talk about the Traxxas ball diff in particular. So the one I bought is the Traxxas Pro Ball differential. MIP used to also make a ball diff for the Slash, but I think they've discontinued that, so you can't get that anymore. So it's kind of the only option. I suspect this ball diff does not sell a whole lot. Obviously the Slash is more of a basher vehicle, and so ball diffs tend to be more for racing, I'd say. So I suspect, you know, they don't sell a whole lot of these things. I was able to pick one up on eBay for about $33. I think they retail for like $50 or $60. So you can definitely find some good deals out there, and you know, if you look around online. So the Traxxas ball differential, the kit basically comes with two different gears. I've got a spare one here that I'm using, but the Traxxas uses the bigger one. And you can see each of those little recesses where the individual balls sit. It also comes with this little one that you're not going to use. I assume it's for a nitro vehicle or maybe the SRT or something. I don't know. But basically build it with the Slash version. And this ball diff's a little bit different than other ball diffs I've built. So some of the differences I've noticed during the build is basically that you basically have to press the balls into the individual pockets here. It basically kind of snaps into each of these individual holes. Normally there's kind of like a little pocket that they sit in on one side and they can't really fall through on the other side, but that's just kind of something different about the Traxxas ball diff. It's also kind of a little more open on this one. So basically the outdrive is about wide enough to cover the balls, kind of like what you would see here. That's about the width of the outdrives, basically the outdrive hubs or plates, I guess you call them. And so when you're using the bigger one, the Slash one, you basically have kind of a little bit of opening around the whole perimeter where, you know, it seems like maybe dirt or grease or something could kind of get in there. So it's not maybe quite as well sealed or contained as the smaller gear diff. I wish maybe they just added a little more plastic around the perimeter of this thing, basically to kind of have a little better fitment. So just something different, you know, maybe not the best thing, but yeah, other than that, the ball diff went together fairly straightforward. You know, follow the directions, look at the pictures. It uses basically a spring stack of basically dome shims rather than a normal coiled spring. So that's something a little different. And it also adjusts a little bit different than most of the diffs I'm used to. So one thing you do have to do is basically drill a hole in your transmission if you want to adjust it. So you can see that hole right there. Basically, let me see if I can get it right there. On the top of the transmission, you gotta drill like a 2.5 millimeter hole. It does not come with a drill bit. Obviously, you need your own drill and drill bit. But that's basically so that you can adjust the differential from the outside. So putting it together was not that complicated. I've built quite a few ball diffs in my life, so it was not hard for me. But if it's your first ball diff, it may be a little bit weird, but just follow the directions and you should be okay. The nice thing for that little hole that you have to drill is that they actually provide a little paper template. You can basically put it on top of your transmission, mark exactly where to drill it, and it worked out just fine for me. So ball diff went together pretty well. You know, fits perfectly fine, no issues there. Couple quick tips on ball diffs in general, you know, that might improve your experience with them. So definitely some things you need to pay attention to with ball diffs is that it has to be set correctly. If it's too loose, it's going to slip, and then basically you're going to flatten out the little ball bearings inside your ball diff, and then basically kind of destroy it. Also, if you run it too tight, then you're not going to get the right diff action, and it's going to be hard to go around corners. So setting the diff is crucial to proper usage of the ball differential, and I think that's kind of the area where most people probably get a bad experience with ball diffs. You know, if you need a little bit of experience with it, you need kind of a little bit of tuning and trial and error, and you know, you may destroy a ball diff or two before you kind of figure it out, but once you do, I think you do enjoy some benefits over the gear diff. So quick thing on setting the ball diff. After you build it, you definitely want to break it in, and there's videos on YouTube on how to do it, but essentially, a quick overview, you basically grab one wheel and then pull the throttle and let the other side, you know, rotate at a really slow speed. You just kind of do that for, you know, about a minute or so. Then you switch sides, you grab the other side, pull the throttle just a hair, and let that thing rotate while one side is locked, essentially. And so you kind of go back and forth between the two. Basically, you need to break in that ball diff because it will loosen over time after the first pack or two, and if you run it too loose, you're going to destroy it. So breaking it is critical, it is essential, and if you do that, I think you'll have a lot better experience with the ball diff. Besides breaking it in, the other thing you want to do is make sure the setting is correct, and the quickest way, or sort of easiest way I found, is basically to see if I can actually run this kind of in the air and show you how this works. But kind of a good baseline is basically to have about a half rotation when you flick both sides of the car sort of separately. So grab one wheel, flick it, you know, clockwise, grab the other wheel, flick it the other direction, and you should see about a 50% or about a half turn or about a 3/4 turn of rotation when you flick it. So I put a little piece of tape on here, and hopefully you can kind of see that. But yeah, when you flick it, it should rotate about halfway to 3/4 way, and that's about a good standard setting. And so if you set it to about that, I think you'll get a lot better experience. If it's less than that, it's too tight. If it's looser than that, obviously it's too loose, and once again, it may slip. You may have a problem with that. And then sort of the last thing I would recommend with ball diffs is to make sure that your slipper is set correctly. So your slipper has to give, or your ball diff has to give, when basically your wheels are turning faster or slower than the ground is. So if you do a jump, nail the throttle, and your tires are spinning really fast, and then you land, but your car's not actually moving that fast, something's got to give, because the car, the tires are turning out like 30 miles an hour, but the car's only going like 10 miles an hour. So something needs to slip, something needs to give. Your slipper's set too tight, it'll end up being the ball diff. So proper slipper settings is important. So just some quick tips about ball diffs. Get a little bit more enjoyment and better experience with them overall, and hopefully that helped. I know ball diffs, honestly, if you look online, if you look on the forums, people are going to say ball diffs are terrible, they suck, whatever. And it's not so much that they suck, but they have their limitations. You do have to pay attention, and if you follow those steps and kind of follow those tips and tricks that I gave you, I think you'll have a better experience, and the ball diff will work better for you. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Traxxas ball differential. I did install it. I have been running it for a while. I did notice it's actually working pretty good. It is smooth. I'm getting nice diff action. The car's a little more consistent than it was with the gear diff, or even the original stock diff with the bad horsey gear diff grease inside. So ball diffs in general, I think, are nice because they're externally adjustable and they're going to be a little more consistent. And so over time, they will degrade. The balls will kind of get gritty. You will have to rebuild it probably every, I'd say, 50 to 70 packs or so. It's about how often I rebuild the ball diffs. So they do take some maintenance. Gear diffs, obviously, I never do any maintenance unless they leak, which, it kind of depends on the design of the gear diff. Some of them last really long, some of them don't. So I have to service those as well. But ball diffs, yeah, you will have to service them. They're not, completely maintenance free. And you will want to check them occasionally after you've got them broken in and make sure that your setting is right. So for the Traxxas ball diff in particular, it's actually kind of cool because it is externally adjustable. And let's see if I can find my actual little Allen wrench. That little hole you drill is actually the way you adjust the differential. So I don't know if we can see this up on the camera, but basically, yeah, I'm going to stick this 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench into that little hole, and so you can kind of see a quick tip on, or basically a quick view of how you actually adjust it. So you stick it in that hole. Yeah, it's pretty much impossible to see on this video, but you basically go down in that hole and you rotate one wheel until you kind of feel it slip into a little hole right there. Let's see if I can get it. Okay, once it basically slips in the little hole, you basically are like halfway there, and then you keep going again until it slides in all the way. So it's kind of a two-step process. You kind of have to rotate the wheel until you feel like it dropped like about a millimeter or two. There's kind of like a two-stage hole in there. And then once you get into that first hole, you rotate again until it basically slips through all the way. And then once it's in there, you can kind of see, basically I've got it stuck in the transmission right now. Then basically you rotate the wheel either clockwise to tighten it, or counterclockwise to basically loosen it. So you just grab the opposite wheel and then turn it depending on whether you want to tighten or loosen it. And that's basically how you adjust it. It takes 5 or 10 seconds, and then you're good to go. And basically you've got a tighter or looser ball differential. So that's one of the things that I really, really like about ball differentials. You can adjust them on the fly. It takes like a few seconds, and you can go out there running in with some different adjustments. So quick tip on tightening or loosening your diff. Why would you want to tighten or loosen it? In general, and there are exceptions obviously, but in general, the tighter your diff, the more forward traction you're going to get. So exiting the corners, pulling on the throttle, both wheels are going to have more of a limited slip action, and then basically be able to drive the car forward. If it's too loose, when you get on the power, basically one wheel will, you know, tend to have more traction than the other. So whatever tire has traction will basically kind of stick, and the other one will just spin in kind of freewheel if you have a really loose diff. If you kind of tighten the diff down, you know, basically if one side has more traction there, they'll still kind of both turn at the same time and give you that forward traction. So on the downside, if you have too tight of a diff, well, it's not going to allow you to go around corners that well, because basically they're not going to be able to rotate as well, right? So when you go around a corner, the outside wheel basically has to follow a longer arc than the inside wheel. So it needs to spin a little bit faster than the other. And so if your diff is basically too tight and not allowing them to rotate at different speeds well enough, well, then it's basically going to kind of like push the car forward rather than going around the corner. It's kind of going to push and understeer. So yeah, that's pretty much my review of the ball differential. So far it's working really well. You know, it's getting the diff action I like. It wasn't that hard to install. You know, you do have to drill that one little hole, but it makes it nice, externally adjustable. I've been able to play with my diff, you know, at the track and do testing and tuning with different diff actions. And the only downside I've found so far is that there's really kind of a really small window in which, you know, the diff is too tight or too loose. You know, I don't know if it's the spring stack or what, but basically you only have about you know, I'd say probably 1/8 of a turn of a window between too tight or too loose, you know. Maybe it'll break in more over time, I'm not really sure, but it does make it a little more difficult to set the diff exactly how you want it. So I've got it set pretty much perfectly, you know, about a 1/2 to a 3/4 turn when I flick the wheels in different directions. And that's what I'd recommend starting with, and then going from there and adjusting as needed. So anyways, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much a review of the Traxxas Pro Ball Differential. I do like it. I think this is going to be the ball diff, or basically the diff, I stick with in my Slash 2-wheel drive racer vehicle. It doesn't leak. I can adjust it on the fly. You know, and it's working really well so far. It does seem to make the truck a little more consistent, a little more, I guess, predictable through the corners. And so, yeah, this thing is going to stand there. So anyways, I hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe, as always, if you haven't already. Let me know what you think about the Pro Ball Diff, if you've used one, or ball diffs in general, or if you have any other tips and tricks for differentials, I'd like to hear them. So anyways, thanks for watching. Look for more videos soon, and we'll see you in another video. Thanks. Bye.